Step 1. Participation/observation. Through my lived experience at the animal shelter, I was able to appreciate a day in the life of a volunteer. I was prepared to get emotional, and it started when I saw the cages as we pulled into the parking lot. I looked over my shoulder and saw 2 volunteers walking a pit bull who looked so happy to be outside, and that made me feel more hopeful. The weather was exceptionally warm that day, a spring day that should make you feel very happy, but my heart ached for the animals that may never get to experience that with a new family. The donation bins outside were overflowing with items that made me think of all of the thoughtful people who take the time out of their day to drop them off. It made me reflect on what I could do to give more. So within a few minutes of being there, I experienced emotions going up and down like a roller coaster, and I did not even get inside yet. That made me feel anxious and apprehensive. I went inside, and the smell of dogs and cats were so strong, but I figured that I would get used to it. The walls inside the building were made of cement and had few windows on the first floor, making it feel like a dungeon, but the colored paintings and pictures made it feel warm inside. There were about 12 dogs there, and I was surprised most were of the pit bull breed. Some would not bark at all, but most were aggressive even if you spoke gentle to them. When I looked into the animals' eyes, I felt an overwhelming feeling of sadness because of not knowing how long that they will live in those conditions, and because I felt so sorry for them. Step 2. Bracketing. I have been to the animal shelter before, but I did not know what to expect while volunteering there. It made me upset to see so many animals without a home. However, I knew it would be a humbling experience to have. I have always had a love for animals, so I was excited to have the opportunity to spend the day with them. I do not have any experience with cats, and I felt that I am more comfortable with dogs. I could not predict how the cats would react because all I could think about was if I were to reach out to pet one, I would jump back and scream. It made me nervous to interact with the dogs as well because I was unsure how they would feel being approached, considering their past. I set all of my beliefs, values, presuppositions, and assumptions aside to maintain a conceptually and theoretically detached attitude during the experience. I assumed that every dog in the shelter would be aggressive and not friendly, but that was not the case. I did not think that I would be doing laundry, washing dishes, folding blankets, or sweeping the floor. I tried not to think of it as being a chore and more like I was doing a good thing for the animals and people working there. I also tried my best to connect with the cats, and it was not as bad as I initially thought it would be. They were sweet, and I approached them gently to assure they would not get upset or try to claw at me. When I walked up to the dog cages, many of them barked and snarled, so I assumed that it was because they were dangerous and not good to bring home. After approaching the animals, I was told by a staff member that their aggressive behavior could be cage aggression to protect themselves. They could act completely different outside of the cage due to not being cooped up. This dangerous behavior causes a disadvantage to them because a potential pet owner would not want to adopt them. Therefore, their initial impression is not always accurate. Step 3. Assertion. The overall experience was very rewarding, and I would want to continue volunteering there in the future. Something that stood out to me was that these animals have a soul just like any other human being. The difference is that they cannot represent themselves and explain why they would be a good addition to someone's family, so someone else has to speak for them. They are denied of loving homes that they could potentially be a part of. It appeared that the pain in their eyes disappeared when you gave them attention, and I saw their spirits come to life. When I gave a few of them a treat, their tails wagged of joy, and I wanted to give them more. I witnessed their fear and pain turn into hope when I gave them any attention, and that made it so difficult to walk away. I connected with a few of the dogs that seemed sweet, and I knew if they had that demeanor in the shelter, they would be a good candidate for adoption. Another thing that stood out to me was not knowing how or why some of these animals were brought to the shelter. I learned that someone can surrender an animal without disclosing the reason. Therefore, the animal could be less appealing due to the potential risks involved. The experience made me realize how important it is to donate and attend fundraisers for these innocent souls, because it is such a worthy cause. Without the help of others, these animals would be lost on the street, which makes donating very meaningful. Though they are homeless now, it is still better than living and being left homeless on the street without food, water, or a safe shelter. This experience opened my eyes to how lucky some animals are to have a home with someone who loves and truly cares for them. I wanted so badly to adopt every one of them so they could have a better quality of life. I have grown to have more empathy for these animals by having this experience, and I gained knowledge about animals' personalities and risk factors involved. You do not want to judge a book by its cover. Step 4. Variation. I imagined if someone else were to volunteer at an animal shelter for the first time, they would have some of the same prejudices that I had. The phenomenon could be constituted in a different way by the amount of experience or connection someone may have with the animals. There are people that have never had animals growing up. Their homes may be too small, they are allergic, they do not have enough time to care for one, or they just simply never wanted one. I think it depends on the person and whether or not they enjoy being in the company of animals and if they had had good experiences with them before. Some people also may not have the same emotional or spiritual connection to animals as I've had. For example, I decided to volunteer at an animal shelter because it is something that I have always wanted to do, and I love animals, especially dogs. People may feel lonely and resort to animal therapy as a coping mechanism to deal with anxiety or stress in their lives. Animals are a good source of happiness and serenity. Another reason is that they are a huge responsibility to care for, which makes a great deal of time and money. Someone may not be willing to do the chore work that they had me do and may think that they would be interacting with the animals more than I did. Another aspect to look at is if someone else is shy and not willing to take the time out of their days to volunteer. Since there are always more ways to interpret a phenomenon, everyone does not or cannot have the same experience. Step 5. Community of inquiry. So how would you feel volunteering at an animal shelter like I volunteered at?
Well, to be honest, I think that I would want to do it, but I wouldn't be able to handle the dogs because I've been to shelters before and I've always seen the dogs barking and being aggressive, and they're always big dogs. And I guess I realized, you really do have to be trained. Like, you think you can be able to go to a shelter and walk dogs and it be all, easy, but you have to be trained and you have to know their backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
But I think most people would want to work with the animals and not do the cleaning part because nobody really wants to clean. But, from what people say, you hear people say that they need more volunteers to clean and do laundry and stuff like that and do the dirty work. Because they make a lot of dirt, that's just something that needs to be done. But
yeah, and I think volunteering, I realized that even though sometimes you don't interact with the animals, it still makes a big impact on them because you're still helping them out. Just doesn't really feel like it all the time.
Oh yeah, for sure. Even like just organizing things, doing laundry, feeding the dogs would be a lot of fun. Getting them treats and stuff like that, through the cage or whatever. But there was one time that I saw a dog being walked outside by one of the volunteers, and the dog just looked so happy, and he was so cute. And then we saw him in the shelter, and he was growling right away, and he was just so, I guess they say they have cage aggression,
mm-hmm.
but they're completely different outside. So I give a lot of credit to people that can just go right in there and handle these animals. Thank God that there's people that, you know, really know what they're doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would think it'd be really rewarding, and it's something I would, you know, something I would definitely want to do with my kids someday.